First story. Son cut ties and abandoned OP, hiring a lawyer to not contact him after she grounded him, took all his electronics, canceled his birthday, and presented his car to his half-sister as a punishment for a prank, now regretting it. I F48 have a son, Jack M19, and a daughter, Alyssa F18, and I am married to Tom M50. Tom is Alyssa's father, but Jack's father is my ex-husband Dan M48. Dan and I had a pretty ugly custody fight, and he lives in New York while we live in Texas. Over the years, Dan has unsuccessfully tried to get Jack to move in with him. It wasn't easy to fight him off since he is a very successful lawyer. Jack is a pretty popular kid in school. His friends on the wrestling team came up with a prank for him to ask a heavily autistic girl who had a crush on him to the prom as a joke, and for him to show up wearing a gorilla suit. Jack originally said no, but the wrestling team actually raised a fund that got to be somewhat north of $800 for him to do it, and they paid for the gorilla suit. Jack agreed. If it matters, this is very out of character for him. After the prom, I was looking around on Instagram and saw pictures of him in the gorilla suit, and I was surprised that he didn't take his girlfriend Jess. After reading the comments, I learned what happened. To say I was furious doesn't even do it justice. I woke Jack up as soon as I saw it and screamed at him until my lungs gave out. Then, when Tom heard what was going on, he joined in. Tom and Jack have never gotten along. I can't prove it, but I suspect Jack's father Dan has a hand in that. Jack told Tom, "F off, I'm talking to my mother." So, we took away all of Jack's electronics, his phone, and we had paid for a car for his graduation present. Because of his prank and disrespect toward Tom, we instead gave it to Alyssa. We also forced him to give us the $800+, and we gave it to his date and made him write a letter of apology. He was also grounded for a month, and we canceled his 18th birthday party. When Jack's birthday came, there was a knock at the door. It was Dan, and he had suitcases. Tom said, "What is this? The custody agreement says you don't get him on this birthday." Dan just looked past Tom and said, "Hey kid, I'm here for the jailbreak." He then pointed at a Mustang and said, "I hope you like Fords. You can practice driving your new car on a road trip back to New York. Let's take a detour to NOLA." The two of them were laughing, high-fiving, and backslapping, and they just ignored us as we tried to intervene. The only time Dan acknowledged me was to look me in the eye and say, as cold as ice, "Checkmate," and for Jack to yell as they were driving off, "F off, Tom." Since then, Jack has had totally no contact with me. He talks a little bit to Alyssa, and from what he does tell her, he's doing well, and Dan is giving him the royal treatment, bringing him to steak houses and Yankees games, and just giving him outright cash. It has been almost a year, and I'm going crazy thinking I've lost my son. So Ada, edit. I see there is a little confusion here about whether Alyssa is my biological daughter or stepdaughter. She is my stepdaughter. We really have a mother-daughter relationship, to the point where it doesn't even occur to me to call her my step. At the risk of understatement, Jack never warmed to Tom the same way. More info in the comments. The thought process behind the punishment. He never really got into that much trouble, and he is largely a good kid. He'd sometimes get into fights, but that all cleared up a few years ago. We'd usually just ground him and make him do extra chores, and that was enough. But it didn't come up a whole lot. Recently, it was maybe grounding him for a weekend here or there for badly blowing curfew, be home at 11, and he rolls in at 12:45. I can't say I had a fully formed plan on what the discipline would be for the prank alone, since it all kind of happened at once. But to me at least, the big thing was the prank, and telling Tom to F off definitely mattered, but was small potatoes compared to that. But less so to Tom for obvious reasons. On Dan OP's ex-husband and his motivation. There is some truth here. I wasn't very kind to Dan when the marriage broke down and could have been more equitable with custody matters in the divorce, which created a lot of bad blood from Dan's side. As much as I'd like to agree that I just have to wait for Dan to get sick of throwing money at Jack, I can't deny that Dan actually does pretty well by Jack, and also that he likely isn't going to be running short on money anytime soon. I spent every day with Dan for so many years and know that man very well. He is an extremely calculating man. His exact thought process was that he saw the perfect opportunity to take his son back after years of feeling slighted through the divorce process, and then hit with everything he had. It worked. Dan always plays the long game, just like I'm sure he's going to play the long game to keep things the way they are. More on Dan. As much as I'd like to demonize Dan, and there are a lot of things I can really say about him, he does truly love Jack, and has really wanted custody for a long time. If it were simple gamesmanship, I don't think he would have been so brutal about it. He truly feels I stole his son. On the extent of the punishment and Jack's relationship with Tom the stepfather, The story with Tom was that my son just never respected him as any kind of authority figure. Even as a young child, if Tom would tell him to do something, he'd tell Tom that he was just a rude guest in his house. I can't prove it, but I have to think Dan had a hand in it. How else would Jack know that it was my money from the divorce that bought the house, and that Tom was broke? Also funny is your mention of my son calling Dan with his side of the story. I have no idea how he did that. I had his phone locked away for 2 weeks when that happened. I suspect that his girlfriend Jess somehow had a hand in it, even though he was barred from seeing Jess. Part of the reason I think that is that this arrangement works out so well for her. She is going to NYU for college, and somehow Dan pulled some stunt to get Jack into Temple in Philadelphia. So they take turns spending weekends with each other in either NY or Philadelphia. Dan's Instagram post from last week was of the three of them having dinner together at Peter Luger's on money troubles and child support issues. I just feel so stupid. I know Dan. He has been waiting years for an opportunity like this, and I handed him the perfect storm. I am not proud of it, but I did not treat Dan very well towards the end of the marriage. To be clear, I never cheated on him though. But he has hated me since then. Also, since he doesn't live with me anymore, child support is terminated. We divorced in New York, where child support goes to 21. I don't know how I'm going to make next month's mortgage. Dan is a very high earner, so it was a big check. He can actually go after me now for child support, and my lawyer tells me he has already filed the paperwork for that. More on child support. Tom is on disability. I knew I'd have a problem in 3 years when Jack aged out of child support, but I was hoping Tom would be back to work by then. Unfortunately, I am very familiar with the way child support works. You have a number for household income, which gets negotiated after it gets to a certain point, because the law says you stop counting dollar for dollar above a threshold. Then, after that total is reached, you split by relative income. I do pretty well, but not like Dan. I used to do better before COVID. At the time of the divorce, I had a very high household income split. It was good for me back then since he had to pay me. Now, I have to pay Dan my portion of that very high number. So, I get the double whammy of losing the checks I was getting. And now I have to write big checks his way. Tom and Jack's difficult relationship. I tried to introduce Tom slowly, and things started out okay. They were never warm, but they were peaceful. Things started getting rougher when Tom moved in. He had an accident at work and got behind on bills. It was a little sooner than we would have liked, but Jack had known him for a year at that point. It started with little things like Tom telling Jack to clean his room, put away his plates, or mow the lawn. Jack just wouldn't do it. I'd noticed that every time Dan flew down to spend a weekend with Jack, it got a bit worse. I remember a few years ago overhearing Jack on the phone call Tom my pet loser. A phrase I know Dan has used about others before. When Jack was 16, there was one time that Tom's back was hurting, and he told Jack to warm him up with a plate of leftovers. Jack was playing a game, and I told him to get it himself. Tom unplugged his Xbox, and then Jack said, "This effing guy. He stays here for free, eats free food, and now even has a butler. This isn't a effing hotel, Tom. You can't afford one." Then another time, when Tom told him to mow the lawn, Jack said, "Don't tell me to mow the lawn at my own house. You mow the lawn and make me a sandwich when you're done." Jack isn't like this with anyone else. He's usually very kind, quick-witted, and gracious. The thing that freaks me out is that it is almost exactly like his father. If he likes you, he'll be as debonair and smooth as can be. But if he doesn't, he really doesn't. And he truly hates Tom. More on their relationship. The end of the marriage wasn't pretty. I have to take responsibility for that, and the divorce was very contentious. Following that, there was a lot of bad blood, but it definitely got worse once Tom entered the picture. Tom once made a Facebook joke about how he wishes they would bring back paddling in schools. To say Dan went nuts does not cover it. He literally got on a plane immediately from New York, busted into my house, and started making all kinds of accusations and threats against Tom. Tom had to literally lock himself in the bathroom and escape out the window, because we all thought Dan was going to do something crazy. Following that, I had to spend the next 2 years in litigation proving that Tom never has and never will lay a hand on Jack. Jack has also been rubbing it in Tom's face that he has his father's permission to defend himself against Tom if he ever wants to get old-fashioned with him. Jack is a 6'2" wrestling champion and MMA hobbyist. Tom is a 50-year-old man with a bad back half his size, and they are both keenly aware of it. If Tom ever laid a hand on Jack, I'd see to it that he'd be in jail. But I suspect his first stop in any such encounter would be the trauma ward. Yet more on their relationship. There is a little cultural clash between Jack and Tom. Tom is an old-fashioned Texas man who believes kids should do what they're told. Jack grew up in Manhattan. Believe me, Tom has way dialed things down from what he'd normally do. But he does believe that kids should listen to adults and help out around the house. He realizes that there is a lot of tension, and that his usual approach isn't going to work. And I have even told him that if he tries it, I won't be able to maintain the marriage if he can't find a way to make a peaceful home with my son. After I told him that, he mostly just tried to step out of any kind of parental role, but sometimes he'd still tell Jack to do something, and Jack would react very badly. Jack acknowledged his wrongdoing, but still felt the punishment was way too harsh. Thanks. He has blocked my number. Alyssa does still talk with him a bit since they had a cordial enough relationship. She even offered to give him the car back to make peace. He told her to keep it since he has a better car now, and he told her that he doesn't have any bad blood against her. For a while, he was telling her that he'd never forgive me. He appreciates that he did wrong, but that I took it way too far by taking the car away, and because I wouldn't let him see his girlfriend for a month. The last time Alyssa brought it up, there was some movement on that. He said maybe sometime in the distant future, but not for years. So Alyssa is acting as a bit of a back channel. However, she's still so young, and I don't like asking her to be in the middle of it, which must be hard because it really hurts her how she sees Jack as a big brother, and how bad Jack's relationship is with her father. OP on apologies, and potentially fixing this. I don't know if I agree with all of this, but for what it is worth, I have tried offering apologies. He has blocked my phone, but I sent him emails in which I apologized for giving his car to Alyssa, for screaming at him, for trying to force a relationship with Tom on him, and for taking the money. He has never responded. You do have a good suggestion, though, for apologizing to Dan. Dan hates me. To take some accountability, the reason for the divorce is that I didn't treat Dan very well during the marriage. He resented the custody schedule. He thought the child support was far beyond what was needed to support Jack, and he made no bones about the fact that he considered me to have stolen his money and his son. But with all that said, the worst he can do is hang up on me. Update. I was denied an official update, but a few of you cared enough about all of this to ask me for updates periodically, so here it is. On the advice of some of the posters, I reached out to Dan to see if he'd be willing to consider brokering peace between me and Jack. About a week later, I got a response telling me to meet him and Jack at a cafe in Manhattan. He arranged a 6 a.m. flight and put me in a dodgy hotel in probably the most dangerous neighborhood in NYC. I arrived and saw Dan, Jack, Jack's girlfriend, Jess, and his friend from a past firm, Jonathan. I noticed Jess had an engagement ring on her finger. Jonathan said Jack has a claim against me for stealing the $840, and until that is resolved, I am not to contact him, but to only contact Jonathan. I told Jonathan that's the money his friends paid him for the prank, and that I gave to the girl. Jonathan said he was aware of the circumstances, but nonetheless, it wasn't my money, and under the law, it was a theft, and Jack has a legal claim against me. I said don't care if it was against the law. Jack had no right to that money, and they can sue me if they want. Jack said, "You locked me up in my room like a prisoner for a month, took the car bought for me with Dad's child support money, took the money, and berated me for hours on end. Unless you're going to give me the car, this is the only thing you can undo. You said you wished we could have handled it better, so here is your chance. Or was that just bullshit lip service?" I told him I was sorry, but I couldn't do it. Jonathan then gave me a cease and desist letter telling me not to contact Jack and to address all communication to Jonathan. Then Jack and Jess left, and I asked Dan if he could talk for a minute. I asked him if he brought me there to humiliate me, and he said, actually no, he didn't. He brought me so I could humiliate myself. He'd actually worked very hard to get Jack to the point where he'd be open to talking to me again if I were willing to back down just a little. But since he knew that if I had to choose between my indignation and that of my own son, I'd choose my indignation every time, just like I did in our marriage. I asked him why he'd put us all through that. He said it was because a part of him wondered if I'd ever learn to pick love over anger. He bet his future that I wouldn't when he divorced me. So he had to see for himself how it actually turned out after all these years. I asked him if Jack was just a pawn in his game. He said no. If I actually had picked Jack, he'd be with me now, and there would have been nothing anyone could have done to stop it. But instead, my indignation over a stranger was more important to me than learning to move on with my own son. I asked him, what about the girl? He then said, I hope she'll be a wonderful daughter to you since you lost a son for her. I told her I didn't know the girl. So then he said, it sounds like a bad trade, and left. Also, I'm apparently not invited to Jack's wedding. At this point, I posted, thanks for posting the update. I'm a little confused as to why you weren't willing to pay the money. These are some quotes from comments you made earlier. If you lose your only child, nothing else really matters. I didn't understand that before. Hopefully, you never do. On whether you would be willing to divorce Tom to get Jack back. If I had to, yes. Truthfully, that's kind of been falling apart anyway. And the only reason I haven't divorced him is because I don't want to lose Alyssa. I should never have touched the car. I should have just grounded him, insisted on the apology, and maybe also made him hand over the money. Losing a relationship with a child is a hell of a thing. It is like death. I hate what he did, but there is nothing worth losing a child over. I lost my son for that girl, who I don't even know. The exact words were high road, low road. I don't care. Whatever wins. The irony is that now I'm sitting where he was, except worse. I'd do anything to get him back. So after all that, you weren't willing to give Jack his $800 back. Where is the disconnect here? If you are really willing to do whatever it takes, then why weren't you willing to do this? And her response. I was so angry. I am still so angry. He was sitting there, smug as can be, with his little girlfriend, my ex, and my ex's best friend there as his lawyer. In that moment, I just couldn't. The whole thing was to humiliate me. They stuck me in a cracked den of a hotel and made me trek all over New York. Then they all showed up laughing and backslapping, and the lawyer told me I couldn't talk to my own son unless I paid him $800. I just don't even know what to do anymore. Dan reversed the polarity on child support, and I'm now a few months behind on the mortgage, and the hole gets deeper and deeper. I placed my house for sale on the market. I'm just at wit's end. Second story. My stepkids called me names and belittled me after their biological mom came back, who abandoned them, and my husband did nothing, so I filed for divorce and walked off. Now they came back, begging to reconcile as their mother abandoned them again. I've been married to my 34-year-old husband for 6 years, and he has twins, a boy and a girl, and they're 16 now. When we started dating or got married, we went to family therapy, and I made it clear that I was not trying to be their mother or replace their mother. Their mother hasn't been in their life since they were about 8. Things have been great with us these past 6 years. They even started calling me mom when they were around 12 or 13. Recently, their biological mother came back into their lives, and they were really excited. Things were great for about 6 months, and then they started to call me by my real name. That hurt, but it's what they chose to do, and I never questioned it. Recently, they've been getting very disrespectful. They don't follow the curfew rules. They're not cleaning up after themselves. They're talking back to me, telling me I'm not their real mom, that I'm the reason she left, which is not true. I didn't meet him until almost a year and a half after she left, and that now that she's back, they don't need me anymore. 3 weeks ago, there was a big blow-up where my stepson called me a B. I took his phone and told him to go to his room until his dad came back, but instead he ran out and went to his mom's. She came over, and it was a big argument. She tried to hit me, and I pushed her out of my house. My stepdaughter told me if I ever put my hands on her mom again, then she'd kick my arse. They both went to their mom's place. After that, I haven't been very active. I usually take them to sports and activities. I don't wake them up for school, so they've been late a few times. I tell them to have their mom wake them up and take them. We were supposed to go to Disney World for their spring break this week, but I canceled everything. I told them and my husband, and I guess they thought I was bluffing. We were supposed to leave Thursday night, and when I didn't start the usual vacation roundup, they were shocked. They started saying I was jealous that their mom came back into their lives, that I'm a horrible person, that I'm selfish, that there was some name calling, and that my husband was silent. I asked him if he was going to step in, and he said I was wrong for canceling. I left and went to stay in a hotel. He has been blowing my phone up, asking me to come back. And yesterday he told me that their mother disappeared again, and they've been calling me crying and apologizing. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't feel like I'm part of their family, and they can't just cry and come back now that she disappeared. I told my husband that I want a divorce, and I'll be back over this week to get my things, but we have nothing to talk about. Yes, I know their mother was manipulating them. I never said otherwise. Yes, they are 16. That doesn't give them the right to treat me this way. Being 16 doesn't mean you get to be disrespectful and threaten me. I have always been in their corner. I know their feelings matter in this, but I am also a person with feelings. I am not only considering or moving forward with this divorce based on how the children acted. It is also that my husband did not back me up in this. If I can't count on him to help me navigate this tough situation that we are all going through, then why should I stay? That does not mean that I should be treated the way I was being treated. That is not normal 16-year-old behavior to threaten me. Call me vile names. I just need time for myself. And I don't want an apology just because their biological mother ran out on them again. I want an apology because they really mean it, and I don't believe anyone can be truly sorry 2 days after their mother vanished again. I would never just abandon them, but I do need time for myself because my feelings were disregarded. Yes, I am an adult, but I still have feelings that hurt and need time for myself. I never asked for or expected them to be perfect. I never expected them to be the most mature people, but I am allowed to be hurt and take time for myself during all of this. They have feelings, and so do I. I love them very much. They are my children, but this is a very complicated situation. This is not because they called me a B. I've been called worse. I'm a woman. This is ultimately about my husband not backing me up during this situation. And yes, I am hurt that they told me that I'm allowed to be. It hurts even worse coming from two people who I love dearly and would never hurt or want any harm to come to them. Comments. No personality 5D421. NTA. If your husband stepped up and actually parented his children, then he wouldn't be looking forward to his second divorce and being a single parent. Charlotte Telecasip. If Biomom hadn't done her disappearing act again, I wonder if he'd even be calling OP to beg her to come back. Late mystery. Biomom knew she won, so she checked out. Vegetable Cod 2340. It was clear what Biomom was doing, but to disappear after she convinced her kids to blow up their home lives just seems messed up. I can see doing that if Biomom has plans to get her family back, but to leave when they need her. I hope these kids realize what kind of person their mom really is, and that their dad gets them the help they need to deal with this. OP, you're not wrong to leave. The moment the disrespect started, your husband should have stepped up. The Fisherman's Wife 22. It's because stepmoms stopped doing the heavy lifting. They started asking their mom to pick up the slack, and then all of a sudden, being a mom again wasn't fun, and she bounced. Classic. Malibu Cat 48. And now dad has to do it all himself and wants OP back because he doesn't want to do it either. OP has been abused by all four of them and finally said enough and left. OP, you are NTA, and you are right to finally take care of yourself. Divorce is hard and sad, but they seem to want what you can do for them, not you for who you are and the love and care you provided for 6 years. Grouchy Advantage 619. 100% correct. They used and abused OP. Now they'll pay the price for their arrogance, entitlement, and lack of respect for all OP offered willingly. They FOFO, and it's too late now. Judgment. NTA. Update. 23 days later. Hello, I have been getting a lot of messages asking for an update. I am now in a position to be able to give an update. You can look at my previous post to see what this is about. I went back to the house 2 days ago, and my husband and I had a long talk about what happened, how I didn't feel protected by him, and how he knew how disrespectful they were being but didn't stop anything. He said that he still loved his ex, and that's pretty much why. He didn't want to do anything for her to leave them again, them, as in him and the twins. But that didn't change how he felt about me. I did not feel comfortable with that. I told him that I'd been there, not her, and how could he still love her? It was very emotional, and there was crying and yelling. I made the decision to move along with the divorce. I spoke to the twins, and they cried and said it's their fault, to forgive them and their dad, and not to leave. I told them that, as much as I love them, staying with their dad and in this home was not an option. But I would still love to have a relationship with them if they wanted. But I am still very much hurt by what happened, and would still appreciate a little more time for myself. I let them know that their actions have consequences, and they can't treat people the way they did. I did move out, and I was staying in a unit in one of my rental properties. Exciting news. I bought my first house. It was a fairly quick process. I'm excited for what's next. I bought my first house ever, and next month I am taking a break from work for a few weeks, or the whole month, maybe 2 or 3, and doing some exploring of the world and healing and finding myself. I lost myself in the twins and my husband and didn't really focus on what I wanted or what made me happy. So I bought tickets again for Disney World. I have also made plans to go to Thailand next month, and from there, I have no clue. I'm doing some spontaneous trips. I have always wanted to see the 7 wonders of the world. Anyway, I am really happy to be getting a break. I told the kids I would love to have them over for dinner when I get settled in at my new place. I do feel bad about canceling their trip to Disney, so I am thinking about funding a trip for them to go this summer for their 17th birthday. Just not with me. I'm excited to be traveling alone, and I need the mental break. That is all, really. Edit. I read the comments about not funding a birthday trip for them, because it is not my responsibility as a mom or step-parent. And you know all of you are right, so I will not be funding that trip. It's still hard for me not to be or jump into that role, and I have to get out of it. But ultimately, they did not respect me as their mom, so I will not be doing that and focusing on myself and my trips. It was just a thought. and nothing was set in stone, and I'm glad I didn't. Thank you to everyone who is here, still giving me advice and kind words. Once they earn my trust back, I will have no problem funding it. Info. There seems to be some confusion. I talked to them 3 days ago. I didn't buy a house 3 days ago. I have property with units duplexes that I rent out to people, and I was staying on one side. I bought a house for me to live in. I have everything I need sorted out to where I can buy this house now, and the divorce is not an issue. You can close on a house in less than 30-45 days if you pay in cash. People are so focused on my financial situation. I'm not rich in any sense, but I do good for myself, and I deserve it because I worked hard for it after I came from nothing. I'm not abandoning them again. The twins have said that they will try to earn my trust back, and if giving me space is what can start that healing process, they'll do it. I'm inviting them over for dinner next month, and we'll see how this goes. Comments. Actual offer 127. Let your husband and their mother know that he still loves to fund the trip for them. Please don't be a doormat. You can be there peripherally for the twins, but ultimately, they're not your responsibility, and that would be overstepping. I still can't get over him saying he still loves the woman who abandoned his kids and him. I wouldn't be surprised if he was having an affair while she was back. PT Zach. Abandoned him and the kids twice. Twice. He is such an idiot. I want you back, but I love her. I want you back, eh? To do what? Maid, nanny, F-buddy? Who the hell says that glad he did when they are trying to patch things up? Miss Blum 3. OP's ex wanted to have his cake and eat it too. I wonder how that played out in his head. Oh, I love my ex-wife, but I want to be with you. Just the right words a person wants to hear. PT Zach. I saw that on a Hallmark card once. I want you around to cook, clean, take the kids to school, run the household, and bend over when I have a yearning. But my dearest Valentine, I love her, not you. It was the last bunch of cards left at the store at midnight on February 13th. For some reason, no one bought them. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.